Now, the first thing we're going to do is just get James and Kat to explain this project. Yes, we're talking about ancient Greek theatre. Yes, we're talking about Trojan women, but we're talking about a particular production of Trojan women that has a particular context. So what I'd like to get you both to do first, before we get into any discussion, is just explain your project to everyone.
Together or individually?
Well, I think that's actually a great way to start because
Together.
We actually have two performances of Women of Troy that we have. So both of us directed a different version.
And we have one thing that we started with absolutely united when it came to the meeting with the text, was that when we first met the text, and we know you are all lovers of classics, so please, we hope we don't chase the audience away right this very second, our first response was, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. That goes for a very long time. The speeches are very, very long. Now, I'm used to directing Greek drama,
Yes.
but the speeches in this one are really long.
And when James came to me, I said no.
And then nothing happens. Like,
Yes.
like nothing. They just wait to die. That's it. Okay, so there's where we started on the same page.
Yeah.
And the proposition to Kat was, Kat, I need you to direct a main stage production of this show. It needs to be big, it needs to put Eagle's Nest back on the theatre map. We've been doing a lot of theatre and education over the last 10 years. If I talk too fast or too quietly for anyone, put your hand up and I will try to calm down. But we've got a lot to say in a very short space of time. So, the proposition was, you need to get the general public's attention to remind them that Eagle's Nest is an art-making organisation, not a theatre and ed company. I need to, on very small numbers of resources, aka only 5 actors, be able to deliver a production of Women of Troy that can fit into any basketball hall, room, classroom, stage, etc. So completely different propositions.
So that's where we began. And basically, it took me 3 reads of the play to be excited. The first one, as we said already, I'm not doing it. Sorry, James. My big belief is that a director has to love the text in order to direct it, in order to really bring it to life and pull the audience along. And I couldn't connect, as we said before, all the drama was happening off stage. And I was going, how am I going to do this for a modern audience? And so James said, no, read it again. So, read it again, and I was like, still didn't get me. And then I went, right, for the third read, I need to do something differently. And that's when all of a sudden, the text came to life. And it was because I started to imagine exactly what the women were talking about. The visuals came to me, and I got really excited. And there were.
And I remember the day you said, I can see the poetry in action.
Yeah.
Kat and I worked as sort of dramaturgs for each other's productions, and I can remember the day Kat came in and I got it. All of a sudden, the poetry has to be visual.
Yeah. And so I said, as long as I'm allowed to mix different art forms, I will do it. And James was fantastic. He gave me freedom. He said, yep, you need to make it work in different amphitheatres. It needs to be flexible so we can move around because we have 4 different venues, but you can do whatever you want. And that's what I did. So for the modern audience, a big thing, and we'll show you some photos in a moment, was to bring, 1, the action onto the stage, 2, to really visualize it, to have movement in there, use the senses, so use music, and I'm a big believer of having the musicians on stage as well, and actually part of the actors, which I ended up doing. And 3, the message, and this is where we actually differ in our 2 different productions. And that was a big thing for me. For me, what was so important was that this play that was written over 2,000 years ago is still so relevant today. So I really wanted to bring out certain Greek drama performance styles and even the costumes, show that to the audience and yet have modern ideas with it as well. And the fact that for me it was a big anti-war play.
For me, and again, sorry to any lovers of the classics in the room, I don't give a damn about the story of Hecuba, I don't give a damn about the story of Andromache, I don't give a damn about the story of Cassandra, I don't give a damn about the story of Troy, I don't give a damn about the story of Astyanax, I don't give a damn about the story of Helen. Did I miss any characters that I don't give a damn about the story of?
Talthybius.
Talthybius. I definitely don't give a damn about the story of Talthybius. Well, actually, no, interestingly I do, but I'll come back to why. What I heard in the play, I function almost always in a very, very minimalist space as a director. I'm only interested in voices, primarily, and blocks that creatures can stand on top of, because blocks create power hierarchies, they create spaces, they create contexts. So, I mean, for example, it's a completely different feeling if I come and stand here. All of a sudden the whole room changes instantly the second I move around it. So I was interested in the relationship, first of all, the women of Troy bit. I don't hear these mythological characters, I don't know if they're real, I don't care if they're real. I know that if I'm dealing with a year 12 audience kid, a lot of the time they're not going to care if they were real or know if they were real. But what I do hear is the screams and moans of captured women echo. You know, it's a line from the text. I hear a story which could tell you 5 different archetypal stories in the names of Hecuba and Andromache. They're ciphers. They're ciphers for women that get moved in Melbourne now. In particular at the beginning of 2019 when we were putting on this show, there was a spate of them. They're mothers, they're grandmothers, they're virgins, they're whores, and they're children. So we've got 5 women's archetypes, and I see Astyanax as one of the archetypal women of the play because innocence itself. So I saw women's archetypal stories, PTSD stories. I then saw catharsis as being the single most significant element of Greek drama. So for me, the chorus was the most important character because of its direct relationship to the audience. Catharsis is the objective because when we live the horrors that are happening in a gendered society through art, it transforms our ability for them to continue to happen in reality. It's a bit over the top, and I am a bit over the top, it's about but that's where I wanted to come to Greek drama, and then the biggest thing is that this song, the whole piece is a song. It's a song of lament. It's a song of lament that asks us, as the audience, to weep and to do something about what's been happening for 2,500 years. This message is 2,500 years old. And agenda politics are probably worse today than they were then. Well, I don't know, worse is funny. Who wants to compare bad gender politics? Bad gender politics, bad gender politics.
So where we then went is once I agreed with James that yes, I'll direct the amphitheater version, was that we started working through the text. Now we did make a lot of cuts. In order to make it work for the modern audience, in the amphitheatres and for the school children, because we only had about 70 minutes that the performance was allowed to go, that version, we cut a lot of the
40% at least.
Probably. I felt really bad.
And sometimes not even very, artistically, just, bored of this monologue. Dead.
Basically. But we made sure that we had the overall story. And then what we also made sure is that what was it that we were able to show on stage without having to go into the dialogue as well.
And what was intriguing about that, and the 2 productions could not be more different in the end product, but the text was identical.
Yeah.
So in terms of the project called How Do We Get a Modern Audience to Get Into Greek Drama, the biggest and most satisfying thing Kat and I found about organising this preparation is it's an invitation to see that the answer is not how do we, but what are the million ways you could get a modern audience interested in Greek drama. It's so alive and so present still.
So I think what we
Shall we tell? Yeah.
Shall we show? What we'll do is we'll start off with, we've got photos from the amphitheatre performance. So we'll show a few. Before we begin this, there was one photo I hoped I would be able to show, but I couldn't find any. When I started this play, or the performance, a big message that I wanted to bring across is, which I said before already, that a play that was written over 2,000 years ago is so relevant still today. And the big anti-war message that I saw in it. And so what we had were 15 performers, hooded, coming onto the stage, onto the amphitheatre, just saying a number, a name, and the cause of death. So what I got all of the performers to choose an event that stood out to them that had happened recently or in the last decade that they wanted people to become aware of.
And by event, you mean a war event, a war tragedy, a violence tragedy.
A violence tragedy, war tragedy, yes. It could have been a single person as well, but it was a violent tragedy. And they said it over and over. And the climax that they built, because they were like the ghosts, the spirits, coming on to really show the horror of our world that we still have these issues.
And I think the thing I saw in this work that Cat did in this space, it played an enormous role in how invested her performers were on stage. Because the first question is, if we're going to tell the story of Women of Troy, not actually how do we get the audience interested, but how do we get the actors interested? Because if the actors are not interested, no hope of getting the audience. And that's, I believe, where you got an enormous investment from your actors, was by getting them to research real life events and relate them to the mythology.
Which then also goes on to the audience. So that's how we began, and there was a huge climax, and then they all dropped. And out of the gowns is where the spirits, as I saw it, of women of Troy who were still caught and were retelling the story until humanity wins. And that was my whole idea that I took out of it, and why we were able to mix modern elements with ancient Greek elements. So, shall we go to the slideshow?
If you were here, I would kiss you. I would sweep you up and keep you in my long dresses till morning, where I could unwrap you as you sleep and dream. To drop, to try to wrestle with my feelings about what is happening. What is happening?
So what you'll be able to see is, or what you would have noticed is, I tried to use lots of different elements in it. So I had fire, really bringing, the symbol of fire into it. I mean, one, the city was burnt as well, but also then the hope and the tragedy. So I wanted to use fire in it, and it sort of gave the audience a moment to reflect as well amongst what they would have seen, because the play, it's not like, it doesn't have this modern overview that we have of, it builds up, and then it gets good. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, doesn't it? I mean, that's the hardest thing. How do we stop an audience from shutting down? When it's just one thing after the next, and it is horrific what happened. So, one of the ideas was to give the audience time to reflect and sit in it. And that I did through the use of fire, through the use of movement, through the use of music was another big one, and then other visuals. So a big visual example that I'll give was, I think James just mentioned it, was with Andromache, and that was with a child. So I had actually a long piece of cloth which we had wrapped up, which you might have seen in the shape, so it looked like a child. but then I also had a dancer be the child as well. And when then Talthybius took the child and threw him over the cliff, you just had the trail of blue cloth lying there. And then we just paused it and we gave the audience a moment to let that sink in as well. So I really wanted to play with the visuals. I really wanted to play with the space. And
it's
with
such a lovely
time.
moment of contrast too, because Kat created this something truly beautiful out of this moment, which broke your heart in one way. I created the child out of using a pillow, which I could throw on the ground, so that when it went thump, you went, oh. But made no effort to make it look like anything beautiful whatsoever. It was a pillow. It was very obviously a pillow, and 10 seconds before we threw it, you're kind of going, couldn't you made some effort with the symbolism on the child? And then it went thump, and you go, oh, I got the symbolism. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really like playing with the line between beauty and horror as well. So we had before the dancer really, screaming. She in this way was a female, was being ripped away from the mother, and then suddenly you have the image of the cloth floating over the edge. What would you say? So that's a big thing, how I tried to really engage the audience. One was with the pace, secondly was with the visuals, and then using...
Which was also your break to an interval, wasn't it? The death of the child?
Mind you, I did actually not want an interval.
I forced that upon you for marketing reasons.
Yes.
Right, I was going to claim it was artistic.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of make it shorter, make it strong, and keep the audience in there rather than breaking it up. But it actually worked perfectly when we did have it, because what I didn't realize is the audience did need that break. And it was really good just to, give them, let them shake it off a little bit and then come back into the space. I also used different performance styles. So I used a Japanese style called Buto, and I actually brought Cassandra's rape scene onto the stage. Again, the reason I did that was one, bringing the drama on there as well, breaking up the monologues where it is a lot of crying women otherwise, so that you could, it gave it a little bit of level, and also really to bring out the horrificness of it and show that. So that was really important for me too, that we weren't hiding from it, because it is horrific what these women talk about. I doubled some characters with Hakiba. That's what I did. I really had the stillness of the older woman who was so strong though and brought everyone together. And then I had the young woman who was the fighter and who really, at times they spoke together. I had different languages being used as well. So we had the older woman, she was Macedonian. So she, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So she, so she spoke in her mother tongue as well, which gave it another eeriness. I played with genders with the gods. So we had a gender neutral performer, and who was also present in both. And I wanted it, because it doesn't matter what gender either, it's the story that is being told for me that mattered. Is there anything else before we move?
You also
on to
made a
yours?
very strong distinction between your chorus and your lead roles. So the lead roles were all very strong, classic, almost modern drama style performances in a kind of almost a naturalistic scene setting at times, versus when the chorus elements came to the play, we had a much more traditional Greek drama feel. But a very strong, obvious visual split between who was the chorus and who was Hecuba, who was Helen, who was Andromache, who was Cassandra, which you could see very quickly in the images themselves.
Yeah. And yet I had the chorus members merging into different characters at times as well. So turning it to the soldiers and really playing with costume